Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Layman's Law School, where usually three Southern gentlemen sit around and talk about the issues of the day. But today I have two Southern belles here to talk with us about some of the new laws that relate to actually fishing and your rights to move along navigable waterways within Georgia. So without further ado, I'll introduce my guests. I have Heather Ridgestill and Tanya Boyd, Paralegals from the Hawk Law Group. Welcome, ladies.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Sorry, I didn't do the introduction before. I'm just running short on time today, so we'll have to get started. Well, Heather, you brought in a topic that is near and dear to your heart.
Indeed.
Okay. What is your topic for today?
Well, as an avid fly fisherman, I'm always looking for a honey hole to get my trout. So I come across a case down in South Georgia where a private landowner was claiming that they had rights to a certain part of the Flint River. That would be a private part of their land. And there was a settlement reached between this private landowner and I believe it was DNR, and they acquiesced and said, okay, we'll consider this your private property. Well, shortly thereafter, in fact, I think it was probably 2 months ago, a bill came across to say that you can't, in a navigable waterway, you cannot restrict someone from being able to, fish, float, whatever the case may be, down these parts of the river.
Sure.
Unless you can prove that you were, I suppose, deeded the property prior to a certain year.
That's right.
Which ultimately this landowner was able to do. So my concern is, so Heather's driving along in North Georgia and there's an amazing creek or river. And I go, oh, wow, that looks fishy. I got to get down there. Sure. And then I opened the car door and I put my rod together and put my waders on, and then boom, private property sign. And what I want to know is, how do we figure out a way to, and I don't want to be a shyster and infringe on anybody's private property. Sure. But is there a back door around getting into that, or is that just something a line you don't want to cross?
Yes and no. Okay, so anytime that you are going on to an area where you're not sure if it's private property or not, you're in danger of being ticketed for trespassing. Okay, this is a relatively minor type of infraction unless you're doing it repeatedly. So you're not going to run into too many problems, number one. Number two, this has to do with riparian rights. Riparian rights are talk about and establish the rights that a landowner that has a waterfront that it abuts up to. So if you're on the back of a river, right? If you're you butt up right to the back of a river, the shoreline, you have rights out to the low level of the shoreline, and those are your private. That's your private land. So can you walk up and fish from the bank on their, in their backyard? Absolutely not. Right. But as long as that water, and this is the thing that defines it, navigable. Okay. I know that you're interested in this type of thing, so I know you know the definition. What is the definition?
Navigable, under the definition that Georgia has placed on it, is basically that you can have a vessel carrying cargo that can easily traverse the waterway. Non-navigable would be, you're not able to load a cargo ship and get it down the body of water safely.
Right. And, it's not really clear. And this is part of the way in which that we sort of get paid, is that when they write a law like that says when you can load cargo onto the ship and get it down easily, well, what does that mean? Right. Okay. Does that mean that you can sit in the boat, put, one set of earbuds in there and take it from Evans to Georgia to sell down at the farmer's market down there? Or Evans to Augusta, that is where case law comes in and actually decides what those navigable waterways are. Luckily for most fishermen out there are resources for actually looking at maps that applications you can pay for. There are actual maps that show you what that navigable waterways are in your area, which ones that have been clearly defined as navigable waterways. And people get really mad. It's so funny that to me, I don't know if y'all seen these YouTube videos, but fishermen that actually like have entire careers of just going to fish at places that they know someone's going to start something. And then, and then they record the interaction because people love watching I watched this lady. She had one of the most, I guess, simple and effective, very effective way of dealing with a fisherman. She didn't want fishing around her dock. Every time he would come up, she asked him, said, "Don't fish around my dock," right? He said, "This is public land." She said, "Okay." And then so she just strips off, jumps in the water around her dock and starts splashing all around. I was like, he's like, "All right, I'll get out of here." But no, the fishermen typically have a right to this. And this was a very unique case. This happened, like you said, let me see, you're down in, was it Flint River Shoal or Flint Jacket Shoals?
Yellow Jacket Shoals down on the Flint River.
That's right. And this is an area, I mean, can you describe the area to me?
Well, it's rocky. It's not a smooth, in my definition, navigable waterway. I don't know that you could really even easily get through there with a kayak, let alone a boat.
Right.
So it's not in any way, in my opinion, a navigable waterway.
Right. And then they can actually, you could actually say that a navigable waterway would be something you could put, materials in and then dragged it over the shallow, very, very shallow waterway. That's how a lot of times they moved it in Savannah. They would have you've seen the canal on the Savannah River, by the Savannah River. That's a very shallow little area. It's deep enough to have these canal boats, but they would have a mule on the side of the canal actually pulling it down the way. And then they run into rough spots or areas that are really shallow. It will pull it over that. You'll get some things out. So as long as you can get that stuff down, really it's there to protect the individual rights and the public's rights, the business's rights to actually conduct business. We want our economy to be strong. The rivers have always been a source of that. Hunters and fishermen spend ridiculous amounts of money every year to have access to all these public lands. We spend ridiculous amounts of money maintaining the cleanliness of these areas, to maintaining the fisheries, and we don't want to have to deal with private property owners coming in and being able to interfere with something that we've invested so much in, and that's where the public policy concern actually weighs out in favor of the actual fishermen in this case.
Do you think it'll have an impact on, so a lot of guide services have private waters that you can pay extra money to fish, these trophy fish.
Sure.
How do you feel like this bill might affect the guided private water companies?
Well, I don't really think that that's going to affect them too much because in part their business is based on their ability to actually find the fish. Now, I know there's a lot of real strict rules and about, I guess, ethical rules that fishermen have. For instance, if you were to take a good friend to a secret little honey hole, right, and y'all catch a bunch of fish and have a great time, and then the next week you try to go back to your honey hole and he's there with 3 of his friends. Right. Is that person still your friend?
Right. They actually did this topic on the Orvis podcast.
Okay.
About if you go out with a guide and they take you to this location and it's a beautiful, wonderful, perfect location.
Sure.
Do ethically, should you go back there? Mm-hmm. And there was obviously
multiple opinions
on both sides. I'm not exactly sure what my opinion of that would be. Right. But I do understand it's their means of income, it's their living, it's their livelihood. Sure. So they, maybe they need these places to remain private.
Well, I think that they're not going to be able to do anything about it, whether it's right or wrong. I think people are going to have the right to go to these places as long as they are on public navigable waterways. If they are on private land, if you have a private pond, you can keep that person out of that area. It's not a part of the public sort of domain of navigable waterways. So, it's interesting. I was preparing for this, and I saw another story, a very interesting story about a environmental activist in Yellowstone National Park, and there's a Yellowstone ranch, and he believes that he tested the water and believed that it was coming from a particular source of this particular club, and what he did was walked up the navigable waterway to the source of where this club was, and found the area where they were dumping stuff in, and actually tested it. Well, they sued him for trespass, and based on these riparian rights about being able to use the navigable waterways, they were able to. I mean, you can walk in the water, so it's you can swim in the water as long as you can use that water and not get onto the banks to get to where you're going. Then you're going to have those protections. You have a right to be in the public. This is our land. Right. So this was actually this issue that you're talking about, where they actually settled this case, and they allowed for the private landowner to own almost halfway into the river.
Right. That
was overturned by the Senate Bill SB 115. That's right. And do you know what that says in its entirety?
It's very short. I know that. Mm-hmm. It's about a page.
Yeah, it's about one page.
Double spaced.
Yeah. Which I'll tell you this, and the speed with which it was done, number one.
Right.
And its briefness, right, leads me to believe that this might very well have been in reaction to this particular settlement. They realized that there was a loophole for these people. If you can actually go back to 1863 and show the land grant, then we're going to be limited in our ability to actually manage the rivers and allow our public to actually fish these things. And so they went around and basically amended it. It says to amend Code Section 4-8-5, Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to the rights of adjoining landowners to navigable streams, so as to provide for intent and title to and public use of navigable waters, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. And it states here in pertinent part that the General Assembly finds that the states procured ownership of all navigable stream beds within the jurisdiction upon the statehood and sovereignty, and is trustee of its people's rights to use and enjoy all navigable streams capable of being used for hunting, fishing, passage, navigation, commerce, transport, pursuant to common law, public trust, doctrine. The state continues to hold title hold title to all such stream beds, except where title in the private party originates from a valid crown or state grant before 1863, and the General Assembly funds the public retained and aforementioned rights under the doctrine, even where private title to beds originated from a valid grant. And that last part is very, very
Which
important.
this landowner had.
And it kind of seems a little bit unfair because they were playing by certain rules and then the law changed. And there are certain circumstances, especially within commerce, that allow you to, you've heard of grandfather laws?
Right. Yes.
Right. Where you spend a bunch of money in reliance on a law being a certain way. And had they had that, then they might have a little bit better way to argue this. But public policy determines when the things are really close in the law about what we should do in a particular case. If public policy weighs heavily in favor in one, then that side will win out. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you very much for joining us on the Layman's Law School. We'll see you next time.